Michael Corleone, Travis Bickle, Harry Callahan, Popeye Doyle. These are a few of the names that make up the catalog of anti-heroes, a model that became more prevalent in film during the 1960s and 70s. They served as the main protagonists of their respective stories, but for all intents and purposes, their actions made them out to be villains. These characters reflected a grim time in the world, and specifically in America, as the country was enveloped in numerous issues from the war in Vietnam to the upheaval of society in the wake of the Civil Rights Movement and the questioning of authority following the tumultuous presidencies of Lyndon Johnson and Richard Nixon. Things were not so great in Japan either. Like America and other Western nations, the country took economic hits due to an oil and energy crisis. Though Japan had bounced back significantly in their economic growth following World War II, the 1970s brought with it stagflation. Though things did not look up for the country, efforts were still made to entertain people both on television and in the movie theaters. One such property of entertainment was the creation by manga artist Kazuhiko Kato, known by his pen name Monkey Punch, with the cool, collected, and generally optimistic anti-hero Lupin III. Lupin III was first developed and released as a manga series in 1965, initially inspired by the fictional French thief Arsène Lupin. Monkey Punch also took some inspiration from James Bond, mainly in his use of gadgets, his calm composure in difficult situations, and his affinity for women. In addition to Lupin, Monkey Punch supported him with a strong cast of colleagues and allies. Lupin's main ally is Daisuke Jigen, an expert marksman with a wide array of weapons. Another common ally, Goemon Ishikawa XIII, is a descendant of respected samurai, whose sword, Zantetsuken, can cut through nearly every object. His rival, Fujigi Mine, is an expert thief herself and usually has an advantage over Lupin thanks to her feminine charms. Her main interest is in herself, meaning that depending on the situation, she will either help or hinder Lupin. Lupin's main antagonist, Inspector Koichi Zenigata, is a police officer who is constantly trying to find and arrest Lupin. The initial manga only lasted for 2 years, but the character gained popularity, allowing for the creation of an animated series. The series titled Lupin III Part 1 further grew the popularity of Lupin, maintaining much success by the time that Miyazaki was approached to direct a feature film about him. The first film, The Mystery of Mamo, had released back in 1978, garnering much success and popularity. Miyazaki himself was not unfamiliar with the character. In fact, he and Isao Takahata had co-directed some episodes of the television series back in 1971 and 72. Under the intense pressure of a 6 to 7 month production schedule, Miyazaki worked hard with his animation staff to deliver the film on time. After this difficult production process, Miyazaki finally finished The Castle of Cagliostro, which was subsequently released in December of 1979. The film opens with Lupin and Jigen fleeing from a casino with a humongous amount of stolen money, only coming to realize that the money they stole was actually counterfeit. Lupin decides that he and Jigen will investigate the source of the counterfeit bills, so they head to where it is believed the bills are coming from, the Grand Duchy of Cagliostro. As they make their way to the Grand Duchy, the two are passed on the road by a woman in a wedding dress, who is being chased by a group of armed thugs. They bring aid to the young woman, who turns out to be unconscious in her car. Lupin rescues her, but after totaling her car and falling off a cliff, he is knocked unconscious. The woman runs off after being spotted by a boat, leaving behind a signet ring. Coming to, Lupin recognizes the emblem on the ring and drives with Jigen to the former royal castle in Cagliostro, which was destroyed in a fire. Looking onto the new castle, Lupin recalls once being in Cagliostro and narrowly escaping it. He also spots in dock the boat that took the young woman hostage. It turns out that the castle is run by Count Cagliostro, a regent of the country, who plans on marrying Clarice, the princess of Cagliostro and the same woman Lupin and Jigen ran into. The Count plans to marry her in order to recover the fabled ancient treasure of Cagliostro, for which he needs both his and Clarice's ancestral rings. Sometime later, Lupin finds out about this in a local restaurant, as well as the fact that he and Jigen are being spied on. That night, a squad of assassins attack Lupin and Jigen at their inn, but they escape. As they escape, Lupin leaves his calling card on the back of Jodot, the Count's butler and chief assassin, who returns to the Count after trying to kill him. Lupin announces that he is going to steal Clarice. Overhearing this conversation is Fujiko, who is posing as Clarice's lady-in-waiting. The next day, Lupin summons Goemon and tips off Inspector Zenigata, who meets with the Count to give him protection. Lupin devises a plan to sneak into the castle through the sewers. As he and Jigen make their way through the waterways, Lupin falls into some gears and gets separated from Jigen. Fortunately, he makes it into the castle through a fountain, while also spotting Zenigata. Disguised as Zenigata, Lupin lures away the guards and makes his way into the inner parts of the castle, while Zenigata ends up trapped in the castle's catacombs. The Count becomes aware of Lupin's presence and allows him to keep pursuing Clarice. Lupin meets up with Fujiko, who informs him that Clarice is in the castle tower. After a daring jump from the main castle, I mean seriously, look at this masterful jump. Lupin makes his way to Clarice and returns her ring, vowing to help her to escape. However, the Count catches Lupin and drops him down a trapdoor into the catacombs, retrieving the ring. The ring turns out to be a fake, however, causing the Count to send 3 assassins to retrieve the real one from Lupin. In the catacombs, Lupin encounters Zenigata, and they form a pact to help each other escape. After overpowering the assassins, they escape into a room full of printing presses, which turns out to be the source of the counterfeits which Cagliostro has used throughout history to form a global shadow empire. Realizing this, Zenigata wants to collect evidence to expose the crime, but Lupin points out they must escape the castle first. They start a fire as a distraction and steal the Count's autogyro, but as they attempt to rescue Clarice, Lupin is seriously wounded. The Count offers to let Lupin go if Clarice offers the ring to him, but if not, he'll kill him. Clarice gives the Count her ring, but as she approaches him, Zenigata crashes into the tower, allowing Fujiko and Lupin to escape. As Lupin recovers from his injuries, Zenigata tries convincing his superiors at Interpol to prosecute the Count for counterfeiting. Interpol fears political repercussions, however, so they halt the investigation and remove Zenigata from the case. Lupin intends to stop the wedding and rescue the princess, revealing to his companions that 10 years earlier she had saved his life during an unsuccessful first attempt to find the treasure of Cagliostro. Fujiko tips off Lupin regarding how to sneak into the castle and forms a plan with Zenigata to publicly reveal the counterfeiting operation under the cover of pursuing Lupin. The wedding commences as planned, with Clarice inhibited by the Count, but Lupin disrupts the ceremony and makes off with Clarice in both of the rings. To expose the Count's operations, Zenigata leads Fujiko, posing as a TV reporter, to the Count's printing facility, exposing the country's counterfeiting scheme. After a bunch of shenanigans in the clock tower, the Count finally corners Lupin and Clarice on the clock tower's face. Lupin attempts to trade the rings for Clarice's life by explaining that placing them in the sockets of the goat face on the clock will reveal Cagliostro's treasure. The Count agrees to the proposition, but soon betrays Lupin, causing him and Clarice to fall into the castle moat. He places the rings into the 2 sockets, which causes the clock arms to converge together and kill the Count, also giving a bit of a satisfying click. The castle's moat then drains, revealing well-preserved ruins of ancient Rome, the true treasure of Cagliostro. After walking through the ancient ruins, Clarice tells Lupin that she doesn't want him to go, even expressing her willingness to become a thief like him. Lupin gently rejects her and he and his friends bid farewell to Clarice, with Zenigata pursuing Lupin again for the crime of stealing Clarice's heart. Lupin III is not an original Miyazaki property. Despite that, he and the animation staff took it upon themselves to move the character into a new direction. Recalling working with the source material, Miyazaki stated, quote, "I liked the energy of this comic. Beyond his drawing sense, I felt the overwhelming energy and hungry spirit from the author. That is why Lupin III himself got much of the same characteristics. He was not a cool, unaffected fellow. I believe that he was a reflection of Monkey Punch himself back then. We found ourselves in common with his hungry spirit as anime creators." He went on to say that he felt that by the time the first film had come out, Lupin had run his course and had nowhere to go. Working on the film, however, Miyazaki became determined to reinvent the character, given that he felt it a challenge to continue with Lupin. Nonetheless, he found a way in making Lupin both intriguing and recognizable. In the film, Miyazaki keeps many of Lupin's trademarks intact, like his playboy attitude and affinity for Bond-like gadgets, but he also presents a more mature side to him, one that is never very surprised or overly concerned about the situation he's in. This is a Lupin that has, as some people have commented, grown up under the direction of Miyazaki. Lupin also shows a great level of optimism. Though things were grim in the world around the time of Lupin, there were also glimmers of hope. It's important to note that Cagliostro came out around the time that Star Wars was released, which subtly ushered in a small, albeit strong sense of optimism. Watching the film, I also think that Lupin carries this same sentiment. This is in stark contrast to how Lupin had been in the past, where he fit in with the mood and attitude of the early 70s. The changes also appeared in the supporting cast, who also presented more upbeat personalities compared to their former interpretations. While not exactly a direct evolution from Conan, Cagliostro does retain certain elements that make it seem familiar. The Count is very much like Lepka in both his thirst for power and disregard for most of those who are under them. Clarice too is like Lana, who holds the key, in the case of her ring, to the desired end that the antagonist desires. Lupin, to some degree, acts like a grown-up Conan, especially in his calm composure in difficult situations. The most obvious trademark of Miyazaki that I observed when watching this was his use of silence, specifically in the scene with the old castle. What Miyazaki accomplishes with silence is for the plot to take a bit of a breather, though not to the point where the viewer forgets what's happening. Rather, the extended silence allows for the viewer to become more attached to the character, or to get inside the character's mind and motivations. Miyazaki doesn't always use silence like this, but the fact that it is used in this film is something that I believe is key to the rest of his works. Despite the connections to Conan and his use of silence, Cagliostro lacks most of Miyazaki's other trademarks. There is no grand theme about how technology and nature interact, the cruelties of war, or the magic in youth and mystery. Cagliostro sort of exists as part of the Lupin anthology. Though the film is not an original property from Miyazaki, it does share some of the core elements that would become staple trademarks of his later works. From what I could gather, it has become the most popular of the Lupin films, and in some sense, gave the character a path forward, even to the present day, with both Lupin III the First and Lupin III Part 6 being very well received. Going into the 1980s, Miyazaki remained very busy. In fact, he returned to direct 2 episodes of the second Lupin series, Lupin III Part 2. Gaining much success from Cagliostro, he began to seek out the rights to adapt the comic book Rolf, but unfortunately he was unsuccessful in his efforts and the adaptation would never see the light of day. In between the smaller projects that he worked on, Miyazaki also started writing for the magazine Animage, which allowed him to draw sketches for possible projects. By late 1981, Animage allowed him to take on a new project, one that would fulfill his earlier dreams in life: the ability to create a manga.
"いてつく夜も二人で渡